Welcome back to 15-Minute Discourse. Looks like we're doing a deep dive into artificial photosynthesis today.
It's a field with so much potential. I mean, we're talking about like mimicking nature to, maybe even change the world, right?
Artificial photosynthesis, we're talking about basically recreating photosynthesis, right? Using sunlight, CO2, and water to make, fuels, chemicals, that sort of thing. But instead of it happening in a plant, we're doing it, well, artificially.
Exactly. And it's not just like copying what plants do, right? It's about uh, taking what they do and maybe even exceeding what nature can do, like, opening up possibilities that even plants haven't figured out.
Now, that's thinking big. But one thing that kind of jumped out at me when I was looking through all this research is that we're not just talking about fuel here. I mean, you have notes here about, like, producing food in the dark.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the most interesting things about artificial photosynthesis is how versatile it is. I mean, we could make food without sunlight, maybe capture carbon from the atmosphere better, even make like whole new materials.
Okay, so my mind is officially blown. So really understand this. Let's zoom in on the actual process here. Like, what are the main steps involved in artificial photosynthesis?
Okay, so imagine this, right? First, we got to, capture that sunlight, just like a solar panel does. That's what we call the light harvesting stage. Then we need to change that light energy into like separated charges. Think of it like making a flow of electrons, right? That's charge separation. And then finally, we use those separated charges to power those chemical reactions that give us the fuels, the chemicals, or even the food that we want. And that's what we call redox catalysis.
Okay, so it's like a carefully choreographed, dance of electrons, right? And they're powered by sunlight, and then that leads to creating something totally new.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a very elegant dance, and this is where things start to get really tricky. One of the articles you gave me mentioned the Honda Fujishima effect, and that was discovered back in the 1960s. And in it, scientists used titanium dioxide to split water using sunlight.
Right, right. I remember reading about that. It seemed really groundbreaking at the time. So what happened? Why isn't this technology everywhere?
Yeah, well, it was a huge discovery, but it kind of showed us how complicated this all is. So titanium dioxide, yeah, it works, but it mostly responds to ultraviolet light, and that's only a tiny part of the sunlight we get. Plus, making this process bigger, like making it on a large scale and making it affordable, that turned out to be a big, big problem.
It seems like copying nature is harder than it looks, right?
Oh, for sure.
So speaking of copying nature, you have a note here about an artificial leaf. What's that all about?
Ah, yes, the artificial leaf, a concept that, well, it's captured people's imaginations for a long time. It's basically, a device that's made to convert sunlight directly into fuel, just like a real leaf does. And there was this really cool demonstration back in 1983 by William Ayres, and he used something called a multi-junction semiconductor to split water using visible light.
Oh, wow. So we were on the right track way back then. So why didn't it take off?
That is the question, isn't it? So the idea is great, right? But the reality is it's way more complicated. I mean, there was even this startup that tried to like sell an artificial leaf, but they had to drop the whole project. It turned out that their prototype wasn't actually cheaper than the ways we already have. It just shows that, you can have a brilliant idea, but making it work in the real world, making it on a big scale and making it, affordable, that's the real challenge.
So it sounds like we're in a race against, what, billions of years of evolution?
Yeah, pretty much.
So, like, how efficient is what we're making in the lab compared to, good old-fashioned photosynthesis?
That's a really important question. So natural photosynthesis, it might not be the most energy dense, but it's had a long time to get good at what it does. It's super efficient at turning sunlight into that stored chemical energy. And our artificial systems, well, they're getting better fast, but they're still trying to catch up. Like some studies show that, for example, solar panels, they're way better at turning sunlight into electricity than natural photosynthesis is.
Oh, wow. So we're already beating nature in some areas.
Yeah, in a way.
But you said earlier that artificial photosynthesis could actually be even better than natural processes. So how do we get there?
That's what's really exciting. I mean, think about it. With solar panels, we still have to change that electricity into chemical energy that we can store. But artificial photosynthesis, it's all about going directly from sunlight to that storable fuel, those chemicals, cutting out that extra step. And that could mean we end up with even higher efficiency overall.
Okay, that makes sense. So, let's dig into how we actually do this CO2 reduction. You have a whole section here about different methods, electrocatalysis, photocatalysis, even biocatalysis. It's like a science buffet.
Yeah, it is a bit like a buffet. Each approach has its own, I guess, pros and cons, potential benefits. So like electrocatalysis, that one uses electricity to drive those chemical reactions. And that's great for control. You can be really precise, but you need an external power source, right? And then there's photocatalysis, and that one uses sunlight directly, which is, much more sustainable, but it can be less efficient. And then of course you have photoelectrocatalysis, and that one's kind of a combination, trying to get the best of both worlds.
And then there's biocatalysis. That sounds like we're going straight to nature's playbook, huh?
You got it. Biocatalysis uses enzymes, which are, nature's tiny little catalysts, and they help with that CO2 reduction. It's all about tapping into how amazingly deficient and specific nature is. Think of these enzymes like really specialized chefs, Each one can make this complicated dish with almost no waste.
Okay, now I'm getting hungry just think about it. But I imagine those tiny chefs, they could be a little picky about where they work, right?
That's the thing with biocatalysis. Enzymes, they're kind of sensitive, it's like trying to get a really delicate orchid to grow in the desert. It's tough. We need to, create the perfect conditions for them to do their thing.
So a lot of pros and cons to weigh, for sure. But out of all these different approaches, what are some of the most exciting things you found in your research? Like any big breakthroughs?
Well, one area that's getting a lot of attention is bio-inspired solutions. Where basically, we're looking at nature's designs and we're trying to learn from them to make our systems, more efficient and tougher.
It's like saying, hey, nature, you've had, what, billions of years to figure this out, right? Mind if we steal some ideas?
Exactly.
So what kind of bio-inspired approaches are we talking about here?
Well, for example, there's enzyme mobilization. That's where we attach these delicate enzymes to something really sturdy, like giving those orchids a strong trellis to climb on. Right, it helps them survive in a rough environment. And then there's hybrid materials, and that's where you combine natural things like enzymes with tough synthetic materials. It's like making a bionic leaf, I guess. Part natural, part engineered.
That is pretty cool. So we're combining the best of both worlds, right? And speaking of, cutting edge stuff, your notes mention nanotechnology being a big part of artificial photosynthesis. How are those tiny particles making a difference?
Nanotechnology is it's a game changer because it lets us, work with materials at the atomic and molecular level, which is exactly where these catalytic reactions happen. Scientists are using nanomaterials like quantum dots and plasmonic nanoparticles. They use those to improve light absorption and charge separation, making the whole process more efficient.
It's wild how such tiny things can have such a big impact. But I imagine working at that scale, it must come with its own challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely. Nanotechnology is really promising, but yeah, there are definitely hurdles. Making things at the nanoscale, it can be tricky and expensive, and we got to be careful about the environmental impact too. But the ability to fine tune materials at such a tiny level, that's a powerful tool, for making really efficient artificial photosynthesis systems.
It feels like we're on the edge of a revolution in material science, doesn't it?
It does.
But with all this amazing potential, what are some of the biggest roadblocks stopping artificial photosynthesis from really, taking off?
Well, even with all this progress, there are still big challenges like scalability, durability, and cost. Those are still big hurdles. For instance, a lot of the materials we use now, like organic dyes and those noble metal catalysts, they tend to break down, or they're just too expensive to use on a large scale.
So it's like a balancing act, right? We need to find the right materials that are, efficient and strong and affordable, kind of like searching for like the holy grail of materials science.
Yeah, you could say that. It's a tough challenge, but there are, researchers all over the world working on it, and they're incredibly clever and determined. So, let's talk more about those roadblocks, the challenges. You mentioned durable materials. What are we really dealing with there?
Well, one of the articles, it described it like trying to build a boat out of paper. You might be able to launch it, but it's not going to last very long out on the open sea.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The environments where all this artificial photosynthesis stuff happens, they can be pretty harsh. Some of those catalysts they break down, they corrode when they're exposed to like water or electrolytes for too long. It's like trying to get a delicate little flower to grow out in the middle of the desert, right? It's not easy. We need materials that are really tough, tough enough to handle it.
Okay, so durability is one thing, but then there's the cost, right? A lot of those materials you mentioned, like the noble metal catalysts, those sound pretty expensive. Like, can we really scale this up if we're using, rare and expensive ingredients?
Yeah, that's a good point. Those noble metal like platinum and iridium, they're great catalysts, but they're too rare, they're too expensive to use everywhere, it'd be like trying to build like affordable housing out of gold bricks, right? Not exactly sustainable. Researchers they're really looking for alternatives, things that are, more abundant, more common, and that can do the same job without breaking the bank.
So it's like a treasure hunt, right? A treasure hunt for the perfect material, efficient, durable, affordable.
Yeah, it is.
But even if we find the right stuff, isn't scaling up production a whole other challenge?
Oh, absolutely. We can do amazing things in a lab, right? In a controlled environment. But taking that and making it work on a huge scale, like in a factory, that's a whole other story. Think of it like making a cake, right? It's easy to bake a small one, but try baking a cake for 1,000 people. It's a whole different set of challenges.
Oh, I've definitely had some baking disasters, trust me. So are we basically trying to figure out how to bake a giant, super complicated and delicious artificial photosynthesis cake that everyone can enjoy?
That's a very tasty way to put it. But yeah, we need reliable ways to manufacture these things, processes that can produce high quality materials and devices consistently on a large scale. It's not just about, scientific discoveries. It's about engineering, about innovation in how we make things.
Now, this is where I get a little confused. We've been, comparing artificial photosynthesis to solar panels, but solar panels, I mean, those are already out there, right? People are using them. So why is artificial photosynthesis still so far behind?
That's a great question, and there are a few reasons for that. First of all, solar panels they have a simpler job. They just got to turn sunlight into electricity. But artificial photosynthesis, like we've been talking about, it's way more complicated. It's got all these steps, these reactions.
So it's like comparing building a simple little circuit to building a miniature chemical plant.
Exactly, and that complexity it makes it harder to get it just right and then to scale it up. And then the other thing is solar panel technology. It's had decades of research and development, tons of money poured into it. Artificial photosynthesis, it's a newer field. It hasn't had that same level of support.
So it's partly a science problem and partly a resource problem.
Yeah, you could say that.
But even with all these challenges, there's still so much optimism about artificial photosynthesis. Are we getting carried away, or is there really something to be excited about?
The optimism, it's definitely there, and I think it's justified. I mean, think about the potential benefits. We're talking about clean, renewable fuels made on demand using just sunlight, water, and CO2. I mean, that could drastically reduce how much we rely on fossil fuels. It could help with climate change, and it could create a ton of new economic opportunities.
It almost sounds too good to be true, but realistically, how far away are we from actually seeing this stuff in our lives? Are we talking years, decades, what?
It's tough to say for sure. It's a field that's always changing. New breakthroughs are happening all the time. Some experts think we could see commercially viable systems like within the next decade or two. Others are they're a little more cautious. They think it'll take longer. It's kind of like like watching a rocket launch. It takes time, it takes preparation, but when it finally lifts off, it's incredible.
Speaking of exciting developments, I was really intrigued by that concept of, bio-inspired solutions that we talked about earlier. Can you tell me a little more about how researchers are using, nature as inspiration to build better systems?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Bioinspired solutions. It's all about learning from nature's designs and applying those principles to artificial photosynthesis. It's like studying a bird's wing to design a better airplane. In this case, we're looking at how plants and other photosynthetic organisms, how they capture sunlight so well, how they move those electrons around, and how they make those chemical reactions happen.
So we're basically saying, hey, nature, you've had billions of years to perfect this, right? Mind if we borrow a few ideas?
Exactly.
So what kind of tricks are we learning?
Well, one example is enzyme immobilization, which we touched on before. By attaching those enzymes to a solid support, we can make them more stable. Make them better suited for artificial systems.
So it's like giving them a little suit of armor, right, to help them handle those tough conditions.
Yeah, exactly. And another really interesting area is the development of hybrid materials. That's where we combine, the efficiency of natural components with the toughness of synthetic materials. It's like making a bionic leaf, right? Part natural, part engineered. One promising approach is using something called metal organic frameworks or MOFs. They're these highly porous materials. They have incredible surface area. It's like creating a huge network of tiny spaces where those bio-inspired catalysts can do their work.
So we're building these tiny little factories, right, like at the molecular level.
Yeah, pretty much.
And speaking of working at such tiny scales, your notes also talk about nanotechnology in this field. How are those tiny particles having such a big impact?
Nanotechnology, it's all about, manipulating materials at the atomic and molecular level, which is like that's where it all happens, right? Those catalytic reactions. And scientists are using nanomaterials like quantum dots and plasmonic nanoparticles, and they use those to really fine-tune the system, enhance light absorption, charge separation, make the whole process more efficient.
It's like we're optimizing the system, right, but at the nanoscale, squeezing out every little bit of performance. Can you give me some specific examples of how these nanoparticles are being used?
Yeah, so quantum dots, for example, those are tiny semiconductor particles, and they can absorb specific wavelengths of light and then emit photons with a different energy. And that lets us adjust the light absorption properties of our artificial systems so they match the solar spectrum better. It's like having a custom design antenna for catching sunlight.
And what about those plasmonic nanoparticles? What's their special trick?
Plasmonic nanoparticles, they're usually made of metals like gold or silver, and they have this really cool ability to interact with light. When light hits them, it creates this collective oscillation of electrons called a plasmon, and that plasmon can actually enhance the electric field near the nanoparticle, and that makes light absorption and charge separation more efficient.
So it's like adding a tiny little amplifier, right, to boost the signal.
Yeah, something like that.
It's amazing how these tiny things can have such a big effect. It really does feel like we're on the verge of a revolution in materials science. What other advances are shaping the field of artificial photosynthesis?
Well, one area that's really taking off is computational modeling. There are techniques like density functional theory or DFT, and they let scientists, simulate how materials and catalysts behave at the atomic level, and that gives us insights into how these reactions work.
So we're creating these virtual labs, right? Where we can test all these different ideas without having to actually make every material in the real world.
Exactly. It's like having a fast forward button for research. We can use these computational tools to quickly look at and evaluate tons of potential materials and catalyst designs, and that really speeds up the discovery process. And we're also starting to see machine learning being used to analyze these huge data sets and find those promising candidates for further research.
It sounds like we're entering a whole new era of scientific discovery. It's really exciting. With all these advancements, it seems like we're getting closer and closer to actually realizing the full potential of artificial photosynthesis. But as we talked about before, there's also the ethical side of things to consider. What are some of the concerns we should be thinking about as this technology develops?
That's a really important point. The potential benefits are huge, but we have to be careful about the bigger picture, you know. One concern is that, what if we create these super efficient artificial systems and they actually outcompete natural photosynthesis? What would that do to ecosystems and biodiversity?
So it's about finding a balance, right, between advancing technology and protecting the environment.
Exactly. We got to be thoughtful. We got to think about the potential environmental impact and figure out ways to minimize any risks. And we also need to think about access and equity. Like if artificial photosynthesis becomes, this key technology for producing food and energy, how do we make sure that everyone benefits, that it doesn't just make existing inequalities worse?
Hmm. It's a good reminder that technology it should serve everyone, not just a select few. It seems like we're entering this time where science and ethics and social values they all have to work together more closely than ever before.
I couldn't agree more. And as we explore these new technological frontiers, it's so important to have, open and honest conversations about the future we want to create. Artificial photosynthesis, it has incredible potential, but it also has, potential risks. And it's up to us to navigate this path carefully.
Well said. And in this final part, we're going beyond, just the ideas and actually looking at what's happening in the real world. The labs, the new discoveries, the people who are really pushing the limits of what's possible.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered the basics, right? We've talked about the challenges. We've even, thought about some of the ethical stuff. So now let's look at the research, the stuff that's actually making this technology a reality.
Perfect. And speaking of making things a reality, one of the articles you sent me talks about this research team at Monash University, and they've done something pretty amazing. They've figured out how to turn carbon dioxide into methanol.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Methanol is a really useful fuel. You can use it for a lot of different things. And this team, they've created a new catalyst that can efficiently convert that CO2 into methanol using renewable energy. It's a really promising step towards, getting us off those fossil fuels and maybe even closing that carbon leap.
So we're not just capturing carbon, we're actually turning it into something we can use.
Exactly.
That sounds like a win-win, right? Good for the environment and good for energy. So what other research groups are doing really cool things in this field?
Well, there's the U.S. Department of Energy, and they have this thing called the Joint Center for Artificial Photosynthesis, or JCAP for short. And they've basically put together like this dream team of scientists and engineers, and their whole focus is developing, affordable ways to make fuels from sunlight, water, and CO2. They're working on a lot of different projects, designing new catalysts, optimizing those photoelectrochemical cells we talked about, all sorts of things.
It sounds like a real hub of innovation. It's great to see, that kind of focused effort. Are there similar initiatives happening, in other parts of the world?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's the Swedish Consortium for Artificial Photosynthesis, and they've been around for decades. They're taking this multidisciplinary approach, drawing inspiration from natural photosynthesis to design those biomimetic systems we talked about. They've made a lot of progress in understanding how photosynthesis works, at a fundamental level, and they're using that knowledge to create these artificial systems.
It's really inspiring to see these kinds of collaborations, happening all over the world. It really shows how important this research is. So, beyond these big, research initiatives, are there any smaller companies, startups that are making progress in artificial photosynthesis?
Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of innovative startups popping up. One that I've been following is it's called Liquid 3, and they're developing this technology that uses artificial photosynthesis to turn CO2 and water into hydrogen and oxygen.
So it's like a portable system, right? Powered by sunlight that can split water.
Exactly. And their idea is to create like a decentralized energy system, where individuals and communities can generate their own clean energy right there, right where they are, using resources that are easy to get. It's a really interesting concept, and it could really change how we think about energy access and sustainability.
It's great to see that kind of, entrepreneurial spirit driving innovation. So, we can't talk about artificial photosynthesis without talking about nature, right? Nature is inspiration. We've mentioned those biomimetic approaches a few times. Are there any specific examples of how researchers are using the natural world to help them develop this technology?
Well, one area that's really fascinating is the study of extremophiles. Those are organisms that live in really extreme environments, like hot springs or deep sea vents. And these creatures, they've evolved these really unique ways to capture and use energy, and that gives us some valuable clues for designing artificial systems that are tougher and more adaptable.
It's like nature's giving us a blueprint, right, for sustainable energy solutions. We just got to figure out how to read it.
Exactly. By studying extremophiles, we can learn how to create artificial systems that are more efficient, that are more durable, and that can work in all sorts of different environments.
So this brings us back to the question that everyone's probably wondering, right? When can we expect to see this stuff become, part of our lives? Are we talking years, decades? What?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I wish I had a crystal ball to give you a definite answer. I mean, the field is moving fast, but there are still big challenges, especially when it comes to scaling things up and making it affordable, But the momentum is there. More and more people are investing in it. More and more research is being done, and there's a real sense that we're on the verge of a major breakthrough.
So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah, I think so.
That's exciting.
I think so too. The potential benefits, they're too big to ignore. Imagine a world where we can make clean fuels, valuable chemicals, all on demand using just, sunlight and resources that we have plenty of. We could completely change our energy system. We could minimize our impact on the environment, and we could create a more sustainable future for everyone.
That's a vision worth working towards. This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. So, what's the most important thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the key takeaway here is that artificial photosynthesis, it's more than just a cool scientific idea. It has the potential to really change things for humanity. I mean, it could change how we power our homes, our cars, how we produce food, how we manage our planet's resources. It could change everything.
So it's not just about copying plants. It's about using nature's ingenuity to create a better future.
Exactly. It's a huge challenge, but it's one that we can't ignore. The research is moving forward. The innovations are inspiring, and the possibilities are really endless.
Well said. On that note of optimism, we're wrapping up our deep dive into artificial photosynthesis. It's been a fascinating journey, and we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And if you're as excited about this technology as we are, don't forget to like and subscribe to 15-minute discourse for more deep dives into the cutting edge topics that are shaping our world. Thanks for joining us.